Good morning, everyone. Okay, I'm seeing so many more faces, so that's very good. Today, I'm here with Madili, and we'll also be joined with Mr. Christian, who will be joining in from Zoom in a few minutes. Today, we're going to start off this particular panel talking about housing. I'm really thinking about some of what we think are some cultural, architectural, social innovations in housing on the continent. As a quick reminder, this panel our goal is to not necessarily kind of be speaking or lording over you. We're starting with a presentation so we can have some common ground. We're going to have a quick presentation from Madili, it might not be that quick actually, and then we'll have Q&A. I will moderate some of the Q&A with prepared questions, but most of the time will be for you to ask questions, probe deeper, challenge, and so on and so forth. So to get us started, I'm going to do a quick introduction of Madili, who is here, and then I'll do an introduction of Christian, who will be joining on Zoom. And then I will let Madili go into her presentation. And then I'll also introduce myself for the new people in the room. So hello, everyone. My name is Simi. I am a PhD candidate here at Stanford. I'm in civil and environmental engineering, specifically on a track called Sustainable Design and Construction. And I study how entrepreneurs, engineers, and architects are localizing construction technology to their immediate environment. So what does it mean to make this technology feel and work like it's from a certain type of place? And today, I'm going to be moderating a conversation with Madili here. I've been asked not to introduce them with titles or accolades. They said, tell them about how you met them. Well, tell them about how you met us. So I'll start with the story of how Madili and I met. We actually met on LinkedIn. Funny enough, my colleague Juliet, who's in the room, liked one of Madili's posts. Juliet hasn't even heard this story. She liked a post on LinkedIn, and then I decided to follow Madili. Fast forward, and then we talked like a little bit on LinkedIn. I just said something like, I really love your work, something like that. And then in the very first quarter before I started my PhD, I went to Abuja for a conference. I told my advisor, I need to go to this conference. We're all sitting down here thinking about technology in Africa, but we're in Silicon Valley. What do we know about this? Send me. I need to go see what's going on the ground. So I convinced him, and I went to Abuja actually for the first time. For context, I grew up in Lagos, which is also in Nigeria, but I'd never been to Abuja. And I show up at this conference, and Madili is like, girl, what are you doing here? And then I remember then she took me to lunch multiple times, introduced me to most of the people she was mentoring in her studio. We hung out kind of day in, day out. And then since then, I've been back to Abuja again to visit her, actually to visit someone else. And then we bumped into each other at lunch again. And ever since then, she's just been a great thought partner, a great mentor. And she's somebody who has really wrestled with the dynamic politics of trying to build differently in the place where people are still maybe infatuated with a certain idea of what they think will solve their problems. That is the most apolitical way I can phrase it at this time. But this conversation is not supposed to be apolitical, and it will not be. So I will drop that and allow Madili to begin. When Christian joins on Zoom, then I'll introduce him as well, because it's kind of strange to introduce someone that's not here yet. Okay, that said, Madili, floor is yours.
Thank you, Simi. Thank you, Simi. Thanks for the memories as well. You took me down memory lane there, how we met, and it's very true. I was wondering, what are you doing here? But it's been great, and it's led us to today. So I really want to say thank you. It's an honor and a privilege to be here with everyone at Stanford. My first time in this beautiful part of the country. It looks like paradise to me. So, as she has said, my name is Madili Okumabwa. I am Nigerian American. I'm based in Atlanta and Abuja in Nigeria. Abuja is Nigeria's new capital city. It used to be Lagos. I run an organization called CPDI Africa, the Community Planning and Design Initiative Africa, and our goal is to aid in fast-tracking, I would say, the evolution of African and African diaspora architecture that's culturally and environmentally sustainable. So that is, if the continent has the opportunity to rebuild, not build, as was said earlier today, if we have the opportunity to rebuild, what would we design and organize and plan and build? Africa in whose image? Typically, it would be in her image. What is African architecture? Let's go to the next slide. African architecture is very diverse. Let me go back first of all. That's what CPDI is about. Today's lecture, we'll be talking about the Uku family residence. This is a home that I designed for some very close friends in Abuja who believed in this ideal to design buildings that are modern versions of traditional African architecture. So this is about the Uku family residence. The husband is Igbo and the wife is Shekiri. These are two different ethnic groups from Nigeria. All right, and the home was built back in 2016. So that's what we were talking about in our presentation today. I brought this map up because it's very important. So when we say African architecture, is it one language? No, it will be a plethora of design languages because Africa has thousands of nationalities within. The map on the left shows Africa after being carved up and divided at the Berlin Conference, right? 54, 55 countries now, I think. Each of these countries have their Western identities imposed upon them. But the Africa, in fact, is made up of thousands of countries. We call them tribes, so that's a very negative word, within each of these countries. So for example, Nigeria here, which was created by the British, has about 200 or so ethnicities in it. That's almost 200 countries in Nigeria, right? Different language, spirituality, architecture, food, cuisine, fashion. And that goes for all of these nations in Africa, right? So when you say African architecture, what Africa are you talking about? It would be the Igbo of Nigeria or the Yoruba of Nigeria, the Zulu of South Africa, the Luo of Kenya, Ashanti of Ghana, right? It will even be African-American architecture, Jamaican, Haitian, because they are descendants of Africa. So what kind of design languages would they have? So when Mr. and Mrs. Uku invited me to design their home, they were very, very excited for me to combine both of their cultures into the design. So the maps on the left are Nigeria, Igbo land, so he's Igbo, so there are about 5 or 6 states that have Igbo people in Nigeria, and then she is Ishekiri. Her ethnicity is based in Delta State. So those are the locations where we're going to pull inspiration from to design their home. Okay, so the design brief, they said I should design a home that celebrated both the husband and wife's cultures, Igbo and Shekiri. The home should have features to host performances as the homeowners owned a theater company. The home should be affordable and built from local materials. The development should also include revenue-generating properties in the form of flats or terraces because they wanted to earn income, think Airbnb. And the project should be delivered quickly to save the family from paying expensive rent in their current home. It was a very, very long design brief, but I'll just talk about these few items here. So the family, they engaged me, they purchased their land, and we began to design. First thing, you gotta do your research. So if you want to reflect Igbo architecture, what is Igbo design philosophy? So my interns got online, they start digging, they're reading through books, and they're coming up with examples of what Igbos traditionally built, right? This is pre-colonial, because thanks to colonization, a lot of this evidence was bulldozed and replaced with Western-styled buildings. So we had to do a lot of research. You'd be hard-pressed to see any of these images standing today in most of Africa. So they did research. What kind of materials did they use? How did they lay out their homes? What was the aesthetics, the spirituality? How were they built? Okay, so we just started pulling that information Got a lot of examples. One of the images here on the top right is an obi. An obi is a house that is built for the head of household. It's in the front of the family compound. It's a space where he welcomes his guests, where he has private meetings. It's a space where he could even live in if all of his wives happen to be on their periods at the same time, because it is not healthy for a wife that's on her cycle to feed the husband. So he would even have his own private kitchen in his obi. So it's like his own space, his own home. That's on the top right. That's an example of what it would look like with natural materials in the clay. So we're talking about, again, features that we could include in the design that reflected his Igbo identity. And we're lucky to find images online. Again, like I said, all of this evidence has been destroyed. Some of these elements, like doors and windows and columns, you would find in museums around the world that are now being returned to Africa. But just to see what a door would look like, what patterns and motifs would be on the walls or on doors and windows like this. So we pulled a lot of examples. It was a little harder to find for Ishakiri because her ethnic group is much smaller. I think the Igbos are around 40 million in population. Architectural evidence for Shekiri was a little harder, but we found other non-tangible examples of her identity. Okay, some more images. And then also what we did for the patterns and motifs, which are very, very important. Most of you might know, cultures are known for symbols. Some of these symbols are very spiritual. Some of them are purely decorative. So we pulled some aesthetics. I think the one on the colored image here, the ones on the left are derivatives of the ones on the right. So we would have the designers take a traditional pattern or motif with its meaning and abstract it and come up with something new so that we can include that in the design. We're also thinking this is not to repeat pure traditional architecture, but to do a modern version, right? So the graphic designers were involved. Another thing that we did was pull collages together because we knew that aesthetics, they say it's skin deep or it's not skin deep. Aesthetics is very important because it's the first thing you see when you see something. So when I look at that building, will I know it's a Shakiri? Will I know it's Igbo? If you are Igbo, typically red or white are our colors. Yorubas is blue, right? So what shapes, patterns, or motifs? But a lot of those aesthetics would be pulled from other artifacts that are in the environment: jewelry, fashion, art. You see some calabashes here. They're royal insignia. This collection was from the Ishakiri people. So we just pulled some collages together. For the Igbos, we actually found architecture, and I think you've seen this image already, the Obi. Then there is a shrine, an Mbari shrine, Igbo spiritual buildings, I call it Mbaris. So we found some traditional buildings, and we found contemporary buildings built in Igbo land just to see if they were drawing any inspiration from. But again, we pulled our collages together, patterns, motifs, colors, art. So when we're thinking through coming up with that identity, we had somewhere to start. So our first rendering, let's say, was very contemporary. This is what we came up with in the beginning. They wanted this house, this project, to be where they would live, and they would also have some income-generating space. So we designed them a row of townhomes. The larger unit would be where they would live, and then the others, so you can see those three on the side when you're coming down the driveway into their compound. They would have tenants there, they could earn their money, and you enter that second private gate, and then you get into their space, which would be a larger unit. We use materials that you all already saw. There was stone, there was clay, or brick. We used a lot of the materials that were traditional, but the building is quite contemporary. There is cement. These are terraces, right? This is a modern era. So we came up with quick designs. We blended both Ishakiri and Igbo patterns for some of the motifs in the building. Like I said, because they were into theater, we decided to give them a small theater space in front of their door, the front door. So when you come out, there's this little stage. So we had that for them. They loved the design. And again, most communities in Africa are gated. So there's always going to be a fence and a gate. It's our response to not having 911, right? So you build the fences and the gates to keep, people out and you in. So gate design, fenestration, all of that will always have some kind of pattern on the wrought iron burglary proofing. Then Nigeria happened to the project. For those Nigerians in the audience, you all know what I mean. That is when you're moving full speed ahead, you're hustling, you're trying to make something happen, and all of a sudden you hit a brick wall, and it just doesn't make any sense. You can't understand what just happened. Okay, so I told you they bought the land. We started designing. Then I said, before they give me any money to go out and break ground, let me just go look at that plot one more time and just. So I had the receipt with the beacons on the plot, and now I'm on the site, and I'm walking around, and the beacons on ground don't match the beacons on their receipt. So obviously, we've been designing and building, thinking it's this particular plot, but this is not the plot. So what does that mean? In Nigeria, they say they've sold you fake land. So he bought a plot. The plot was actually an hour away in the forest somewhere, and he paid top money for it. The plot that they showed him was in the heart of town, high end, right? But it was somebody else's plot. Yeah. Happens every day. This is typical. I've lost a lot of money thinking I'm buying legitimate land, but there are no real databases, right? So we found out he's bought fake land. What do we do next? He decides, because he's running out of time, he wants to stop paying all this high rent, that he's gonna do it safe, and that is to buy into a subdivision. In Nigeria, we call them estates. So this is where a developer has bought land, it's legitimate, he's paid all the money to make sure it's legitimate, he's subdivided the plots, and he's come up with a floor plan that everybody must use when they're building in that estate. So this could be 500 houses, and every single house is the exact same, which is a challenge, because that's 500 architects who could have eaten, right? But it's one design, and all the houses are the same, right? So his wanting to do that meant that'll be a challenge for us because we couldn't make his building so Afrocentric, because now we have to make it look like all the rest of them. So these were the two challenges that we faced. Okay, well, we're gonna move forward. So what he does is he buys a plot, a 3-bedroom plot, piece of land, and what he has to do now is work with what they've given him, right? This is the design that comes with that plot. You see how very simple it is. It's cement, corrugated iron roof. There's no real identity or anything. I guess you could put this house anywhere, I'm sure. But this is what he would have to build if he built in this estate. Okay, so fine. The one good thing about this is that they said, if you keep the facade the same, then everything behind the facade you can actually change. You can make that your own. So you could gut the whole floor plan, everything. You can add all these bells and whistles, but make it look like everything else on the street. So that's what we tried to do. So our rendering of that house was this. We added a whole lot, bells and whistles. You can see there's stone, I have clay brick. Of course, there's still cement, because cement is required. That's the language of Nigeria right now. You know, it shows that you've arrived if you're using cement, right? So we couldn't go too far, but you know, if you look at this is his neighbor, and you look at this is very different, right? So we did add a few aesthetics to make it look different, but it was on the inside that we tried to add that culture and identity. There's landscaping, like I said, of course there's lots of lighting here, stone, but the 3 pillars are standard in all of the facades, so we kept with that. So we built it, and it pretty much, I think, looked like the rendering. This was in 2016. You can see that there are solar panels on the top there. It took us about 8 months to build the building. But from the outside, it looks like your standard architecture. It didn't say all the things that we wanted it to say regards, when you look at it, oh my God, it's screaming Igbo identity or it's screaming Ishekiri identity. But that was fine. We got him his house built. About $60,000, maybe that'll be about $170,000 today. Okay, and the family moved in. This is a night shot. So they've been in the house now since 2016, and they're quite happy, I would say. Now, let's talk about the elements that we wanted to reflect, and this is where you start leading into creating architecture that is relevant, that's affordable, that's appropriate, that preserves the heritage of a place. What is the lens that you would look through to create that? If you were going, it doesn't have to be Africa, it could be Spain, it could be Poland. What lens do you look through to create architecture that really tells the people's stories, that fits what they need, that's comfortable, that's affordable, you're using local materials, how was the community engaged? What are the lens that we use? So at CPDI, we came up with these 5, we call them the 5 pillars. One is cultural, one is aesthetics, one is spirituality, one is local materials, and one is community engagement. So in culture, it is how, according to your place, your lifestyle, how do I reflect your lifestyle into your building? For example, many people don't take baths, they take showers. But in every house over there, there's a bathtub. It's wasted money, no one's going to use it. They use it to store things. That's not what a bathtub is. Okay, so culturally, right, that's the wrong element to include. Or another cultural example that I love giving this one, polygamy, right? So a house that has rooms for all the wives, different rooms, right? And a room for the husband, etc. Right? If you're practicing monogamy, then you can have a bedroom that has a husband and a wife and just a husband and wife, and it works, right? Or culture, meaning extended families. If your grandmom, your grandpa, your granddad, uncles, aunts, best friends are part of the family, because families are not just mom, dad, and 2 kids, then how do you reflect that in the size of your house, right? So culture. Aesthetics, we've talked about that already, what it looks like, what is it telling you? Is it telling you, like, I'm wearing this outfit, okay, maybe she's from Africa, maybe she's from Nigeria, right? If I were wearing jeans and a t-shirt, maybe I'm American, though everybody wears t-shirts and jeans around the world. But what you see, what is it telling you? Spirituality, sacred spaces, where do you pour libations? What do those patterns and motifs mean? Are they referencing your ancestors? Is it spirituality? You know, the meaning of those things in patterns and motifs. Local materials, of course, as opposed to having to import from so far away, you're adding up costs. How are you affecting the local materials? What do they use in that region or in that space? And then community engagement, who was involved, who was engaged? Was it built by us, or did we have to go and pay for the labor? Were we getting loans from places that we can never pay the loans back? How did you build your society? How did you build your homes? How are you building them now? These cultural practices, if you include them in today's community building, then it will help for so many reasons, and how. Okay, so for the culture in his floor plan, that was a 3-bedroom bungalow, but we were able to make it 3 levels. We hid an attic there, and we also gave him a basement. So anybody from development control or from the planning authorities coming and they look at the house, they're like, okay, it's just still a 3-bedroom bungalow, but he's got a full basement, he's got a top floor. All this because he needed more space, hosting family members and friends, having his theater. Very important, we added a courtyard. The courtyard is, I don't know if I can point to this. Oh. The courtyard is there in the front. So the way we laid out the space was that when you come in, there is a courtyard which presents as a covered porch that leads to a living room and then a dining room. When they're having events, the courtyard becomes the stage, and then the dining and the living room become where you can line up your chairs for people to watch the event. So culturally, we gave him his space, increased the number of rooms, his full basement with a theater downstairs. They were able to accommodate a whole lot more than they would have if they just kept the 3-bedroom. We also gave him the OB. So this is outside. The OB, like I said, is that space where the head of household would meet and have his private meetings with friends if he didn't want, wife or kids to be involved in. So we gave him a very small OB out there in the front. Thatch roof, the clay bricks, and the wooden pillars, very small, but at least we got him his OB. He also had an OB. Think of it like a man cave today, right? It's a man cave. It's a space where no one is allowed, it's just for him and whatever he wants to do in there. So he actually got 2. He got this one on the outside, and we did give him his man cave in the basement of the house as well. The aesthetics, we used uli patterns. Uli patterns are specific to Igbo culture, and we decorated the wooden French doors. I'm going to call them French doors for right now, but folding doors, that led from the living room to the courtyard. They were designed and built by an environmental artist. His name is Ife Sinachi. And here you can see the pattern. So again, like I said, some of these are spiritual, some of these are purely decorative, but we also found a way to combine the Igbo patterns and the Ishekiri patterns. This was in the wood. And then also this pattern that you see on the grill work, that's part of the courtyard, which is now covered with these masquerade trees. That pattern is also one of the ones that we created from a blend from Igbo and Shekiri. Spirituality, our clients are devout Christians, and when I mean Christians, it's real. There's prayer service just about every day, whether it's virtual or in their house. So they would use all the spaces that we gave them. The theater downstairs, the dining would become private prayer sessions and group prayer sessions. But what they really loved was, again, the courtyard. So this is going up the front door. If you enter that courtyard, now it's covered with those masquerade trees. You can't see out at all. But at 4 a.m. in the morning, that was prayer time, meditation time, and they will come into this space. So spirituality played a big role. Typically in African tradition, before you break ground, you're pouring libations, right? You're thanking God, the goddess of land, thanking her for allowing you to build your house on top of her. So there are lots of ceremonies and rituals. You bless the land before you build. And I know that they did that with, being Christians. I don't know that that's a Christian practice, but blessing the land is very, very important. Our connectivity or our connection to architecture is very spiritual. In my area of the country, when we build houses, we're building them knowing that we would live there forever. What does that mean? It means that while you're alive, you live there, and when you pass away, you are buried there, right? So in my culture, we bury, whether you can say, you tell your architect, when I pass, I want to be buried in the dining room. So the architect should know that they can go ahead and pre-design. I want to be buried in the living room, in my bedroom, in my study. So we literally bury in the house. And that's a very spiritual connection to real estate, right? In my grandfather's house, he's in the living room. My great-granddad's in the dining room. In my father's house, he's in the living room. In my mother's house, which you would think that they'd be buried together, but traditionally, a man belongs to his first son, and a woman belongs to her second son. So when my father passed, we buried him in the house, but when my mom passed, who's from Memphis, Tennessee, by the way, my second brother had to build her a house right next to Dad's, and we buried her in the living room, right? So this is a spiritual connection. Now, him being Igbo, I doubt he's going to want to be buried in the house because this is his city home. but in his village home, he might choose to do that. All right. So spirituality and architecture, very, very strong in Africa. This is that courtyard now with the masquerade trees that are protecting so nobody can see out, and they're all around on both sides. The materials, the use of locally sourced laterite bricks. So this becomes very important. Most people think when you say African architecture, the first thing you want to talk about is mud or earth or clay. That's the only material we think about, but there are so many others. But the reason why clay is so perfect is because it naturally keeps out the heat, naturally, right? So you don't have to worry about air conditions and all that. Because of our colonial legacy, we build with cement these days, part of what came from London, England, when we were colonized. So now we use cement. Cement is the worst material to use in Africa because it traps heat. What we're supposed to do is to be building off of local science and technology that our ancestors knew to use clay. These thick clay walls keep out the heat. So unfortunately, there's a stigma that's still attached to local building materials. People think, oh, it's savage, it's primitive. That's what my great-grandfather used. I'm never going to use that. I want cement, I want glass, I want steel. You can't afford it. It's very hot. You can't maintain it. You can't, okay. Well, one of the issues is if we can remove the stigma from green building materials, have architects learn in school to design beautiful architecture, right? That's making the curriculums Afrocentric. So you can design and build beautifully with green materials, then we could achieve some of the goals that we're talking about, preserving identity and heritage in the built environment, building with green sustainable materials, and making architecture affordable for so many reasons. So this particular client, they were very, very interested in using the laterite bricks. They were committed to green architecture and cultural architecture. We're lucky to find someone who could make the bricks, and he supplied as best he could. So this particular feature in the house was what we celebrated. It was supposed to be much more brick. We'll talk about why there wasn't at the end of the day. But this brick wall goes from the kitchen through the bedroom, through the guest bedroom and the living room. Made using a mold that was imported from South Africa. So now we make those machines ourselves and assemble this brick. So we achieved, and this actually helps his house to be a little bit cooler, right? This is in the dining room, looking through the living room, and then onto the courtyard, which I said now is covered with those masquerade trees. Community engagement, we're able to engage artisans from both of their culture to add to the aesthetics, designers, material suppliers. We also, of course, bought imported artifacts as well to decorate their home. The patterns on these chairs is black and white. There's a specific group in Nigeria, not the Idoma, the TV people of Benue State, their colors are black and white. Igbos is red and white, Idoma is red. So we're also kind of mindful to keep with the color scheme of the cultures. This cow horn, I loved when the interior designer brought this idea. Instead of having a regular handle, why don't you use this cow horn? There it is, and it's actually still there. It hasn't come off. And then they also have a story behind that. Again, the Obi, we were able to get not just locals from Igbo or Ishekiri area, but locals to Abuja, right? So Abuja natives, they are called the Gbagi people or the Gwari people. They're very, very traditional. When Abuja was being built, they didn't want to be incorporated into modernity, so they actually moved back up into the hills and rebuilt their clay family compounds, which is a collection of huts around courtyards. Like I said, everybody gets a room. So a hut is not a house. A hut is just a bedroom, right? So they moved back up into the hills, but they're skilled. They're very, very skilled at making these thatch roofs. So we were able to get that local community to help with some of the thatch production. And of course, landscaping. There are specific plants that are typical to each culture. So we also made sure that we included those in the landscaping. So what I want to say that for that process, the successes and the challenges, we were able to give the family the additional space that they needed. We attempted correctly to use locally sourced materials. Culture and aesthetics, we achieved that. Of course, their meditation and prayer space, they achieved their home ownership. They no longer had to rent. Home ownership is a big deal. Everyone talks about home ownership. It's possible when your house is free because the land was given to you by the chief and you got your family and friends to help you build your house, which is typically how homes and communities were built. It was all sweat equity. You weren't paying for the labor. So home ownership was actually possible because your house was literally free. So when we talk about affordable housing today, it's hard because today no one's giving you free land, no one's helping you build, you're not using locally sourced materials, you're having to look for money or loans, right? But anyway, they achieved their home ownership. And of course, they had reduced maintenance because of some of the materials that they used. The challenges, inability for the local brick manufacturer to produce all we specified. As you saw, there was only one wall of clay brick. We had specified for the house to be 50% brick because we wanted to achieve at least 50% cooling. He couldn't deliver, right? So that was a challenge, is if you actually want to go green, who can actually produce or supply your materials? The house cost more than projected because we had to use a lot of cement because we did not have all of our clay brick. Energy bills went through the roof, but as you saw, he had tons of solar panels on there, so I think he's off grid now. He's able to keep his house cool because of the renewable energy. And then the other challenge was that he didn't get his 100% authentic Igbo Shekiri house because he had to keep within. So when people are driving by and they see the house, they don't think, oh, that's Afrocentric architecture. They just think it's a nice house, right? So that was one challenge there. But anyway, we did get him his home. Mm-hmm. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Madili. I've also just learned that Christian is on Zoom. If you guys can share the Zoom. Hi, Christian. Can you see us and hear us okay?
I can hear you guys and I can see you.
That's perfect.
You guys see me?
We were just about to start the Q&A, but I'm going to quickly introduce you now that you've been able to join, and then I'll open it up to you guys first, actually. We'll do a bounce off with questions. But I met Christian actually when also at the beginning of my PhD, I was trying to figure out what is a good topic to study, like what's useful to a real architect on ground on the continent. So I remember messaging him and just kind of was like an open book. I was like, what is a question that if you had the answer to it, it would advance your practice? And then he gave me a huge question, which was like, what are the needs of Africans in urban houses today? And I later found out that that is a very difficult question to answer in 4 years, and I had to pivot. But since then, we've kind of been bouncing back and forth, different ideas, trying to figure out, what can we actually do within the scope of a 4-year PhD that might make sense and deliver value to somebody who actually has to build something today. And that conversation happened, I want to say, maybe 3 or 4 years ago now, and today Christian is on Zoom with us. So that said, we've kind of given you an example, right, through Madili's presentation of trying to place-make using architecture. What does it mean to retain identity in this modern world? And so I'll start us off with one question, and then if anybody has a question to ask, you can raise up your hand. If you're accepted, you get to come up to the front to sit with us and ask your question. I promise no big mic, small mic, and I think I've delivered. All this to say, my first question is, in this era where there's still so many, and by the way, this question Christian or Madili can answer, because for those that didn't know, and I didn't mention this, they're both architects.
I'm a planner.
And she's also a planner.
Only a planner.
Christian works in Rwanda, Madili works mostly in Nigeria. So my question to both of you, right? I hear a lot of questions around, in a time when people are really just struggling with access to housing, of what import is placemaking? How would you answer that? Anyone can start. Christian, do you want to start? You're smiling.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand the question. I don't know if you can phrase it in a different way for me.
I guess the different question is, we all know that there are different Africans live in different situations. Some are living in abundance, some are living in the opposite of abundance. And
Right.
the question of placemaking, I feel like some people think is unnecessary because so many people are just trying to even be housed. Is it actually important in the grand scheme? Like, why is it important to think about identity and placemaking within how we design homes, not just trying to put people into homes today?
Okay. Yeah, I can attempt to answer it. Maybe can follow. For me, like, saying why is it important? Maybe I don't know. It seems like it's a straightforward question, and that answer should be it is important, but maybe how important it is what I'm going to attempt to speak to. I disagree that of all spaces we use in our built environment, that the home is the same as any other typology. Because the home is where we lead our lives. And, I think it's the space that carries most the identity of a unit of living, whether someone is single, or it's a small family, or it's an extended family. And these are things that are defined by a number of things: culture, faith, belief, family traditions, and everything else. So the home for me is like the one place where I believe there is so many layers of identity that is individual, that is also common, not to use the word collective, because when I use collective memory, I think I'm stepping into the realm of, more families together, as opposed to like, a single family or single unit, one person or people that are best friends that, live together. So because of that, I think for that place to function and work, it has to carry the identity of the inhabitants. And therefore, homes is actually the hardest space to make in the process of architecture.
Yeah, thank you for your answer. Does anybody have a follow-on question or comment? Is everyone shy?
I have a comment. And thanks for the response, Christian. I'm good. Thank you for the response, Christian. Nice to see you, by the way. I do appreciate that he kind of tweaked the question a bit and spoke more to how important it is, because I don't know that the why is as critical as how much we need to find ourselves or identity in things. I think on the flip side of that is, I think the reason why it might not be as dominant in our thoughts or really be demonstrated in design is the way design has kind of morphed. Like if you think about how design is now, like current day design, and how we think about it in mostly scale, or like how quickly we want to churn it out, or how rapidly, and we think about also, high density construction. It's easy to lose self in those things, because at that time the interest is quantity. And so how quickly can you design for the individual and their identity is usually a challenge when you think about the design aspect of placemaking in things. And so while many architects always want to obviously spotlight their client in their design, it's a very hard thing to capture when you're thinking about, density and quantity of things. And I mean, if you look at the current nature of architecture, many times, and if you're thinking about, for instance, pro-poor housing, housing for the disadvantaged, is that even an important thing for them as well? I think at that time, what is top of mind is that we do find somewhere to live, and so it's not really about, does this look like me? Does this speak to who I am as an individual or how I identify myself? I don't know that those things are even top of mind for the individual as well. And so because the goal in those cases aren't really about this other thing, we do tend to lose that. It doesn't mean that maybe the architect or designer doesn't think about those as important, but because the challenge is, how much can you really spotlight or demonstrate the individuality or the identity of the inhabitants? That might be a challenge.
Thank you for your contribution. We've got someone in the back.
Hi, my name is Namdi. Maybe another additional answer. I think the question was, why is it important to have placemaking when the real problem is housing access, right? I think whether or not you decide to make a place, you are going to make a place. If you build a home, whether or not you put additional thought into it, you're going to build a place, right? The question now becomes, what kind of place do you want to live in? It's like having a prenup in a divorce, right? Whether or not you have a prenup, something's going to happen if you get divorced. The real question is, do you want to have a say in it, in what happens? Or do you want to take the default that somebody else prescribes? So if you don't put any thought into making the place, you're going to have whatever, even if you just want a Spartan forum wall, it's still a place. And maybe that's the place that you want. It might not have as much identity as the presentation that Madili just shared, but it's still a place. So I think it is important to have placemaking. Not everybody's going to have the same priorities, but you should decide what kind of place do you want to live in. And maybe even the additional cost, because the way the question was phrased was making it seem like it was an additional layer on top of building the place. Like, oh, you could build a place and then you could come and do placemaking on top of it. But I think these two things are very integrated in the sense that if you're building at all, you're already making a place. So what kind of place do you want to make? That's the real question.
I love that. And then, oh.
Thank you. This question is for planner, architect Madili.
Okay.
I'm really curious to understand more about what was in the design and what was not. So I'm speaking as an Ethiopian American. When I visited my cousin who's an architect in Ethiopia, in Addis Ababa, he showed me a house he was very proud of, and there was a separate room for the woman who works in the house or the person who's going to do the cleaning and the cooking. And he said, look, this has its own bathroom and it has its own layout, but it's not physically attached to the main home. And I know that in other family houses I've gone to, people will have a whole separate unit for cooking, so the food smell doesn't come in to the house as well. And these are things I don't see as much in the States. So I'm curious, did you think about these designs? Really going back to, I think, Simi's question about how do we think about different classes of people, socioeconomic classes living in one space? And I think in these ways, the continent is very far ahead of America in terms of how to integrate different communities together, but there is still a class difference. When you build a space for the servants, you don't want it to be as nice as the people in the main house. And I pushed my cousin, and I'm American, and he's Ethiopian, so we didn't get very far. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Great question. The first thing that we missed out on was the outdoor kitchen, right? So having two kitchens is kind of important. One on the inside where you make your Western food, your pasta, things like that. And then probably there should be one on the outside where you can cook those traditional soups or fry whatever you're frying with the oils that if you cook that on the inside, it's gonna overpower the home. So we always, at CPDL, we always try to say that there should be two kitchens, one indoor, one outdoor. We didn't get to do the outdoor kitchen. Space for where the help or the servants would live, we did include that. So most houses, they call them a boys' quarters. That's part of our colonial legacy, right? The boys are the people that work for you, and where do they sleep? So you would have that room incorporated into your house, but the access would be from outside. Those people today who help you in your home, they could be nannies, cooks, drivers, gardeners. So we did have space for that. That's a huge challenge today. I know in a lot of African cities, you're building for the elite, which is, 10, 20% of the population, but the masses, they have to fend for themselves. They're on the outskirts, just managing to patch housing together. And then they have to find a way to come all the way to town to help you do your work, right? So we haven't balanced that in terms of urban planning. How do we actually design and build mixed communities so everyone, from the millionaire, billionaire to the person who's only earning $100 a month, right? What does that housing look like? And what's the housing for the wealthy? And how do we put it all together and we can live harmoniously? So that challenge we're still working on, but for those who can, they have the quarters in the house, in the compound where the assistance or help can live. I think overall for this particular project, what we had to leave off was the wow factor. For me, if somebody's driving by, would they stop and photograph that house and say, "Oh wow, this is Afrofuturist. This is this is Evo modern, snap selfies and all that." They probably wouldn't because it looked regular, right? So we missed out on that opportunity because they had been scammed out of their original land, right? So we had to fit ourselves into that subdivision. So I hope, yeah, okay.
Before I go to the rest of the audience, I'm going to jump in with another question. I'm so sorry, everyone. But we've talked about the theme of, and I know Christian can speak to this as well, we've talked about what we're designing for, right? I think many people are looking for a certain aesthetic that might not necessarily be Afrocentric in that sense, especially if you see like this person with the estate, he made everyone do this design and seems with very little complaints. And so my question is, I guess, how do you like deal with the tension of designing for a desire that you don't agree with? Because there's a theory behind that, right? And the theory is this look is modern, or this look is better, or this look is good. So what do you do in your practice to deal with that tension?
So we've spent, CPDI just marked 10 years in December, and we've spent, thank you. We've spent 10 years trying to reprogram people's minds, right? So like Dr. Chika was saying is this house shows that I've arrived. It's straight out of Buckhead in Atlanta or somewhere in New York, right? It's just what you see in America. I copied that. That shows wealth and that I'm modern, right? So when I would come saying, no, let's do something that's modern and African. What's your culture? Are you Urhobo? Are you TV? Let's celebrate your identity in a modern way. It was just a mental block. They couldn't see it. They're like, no, she's trying to tell us that she wants to build a big hut for us. I don't want a hut. I said, no, it's not gonna be a hut. It's taking design philosophy from your culture and modernizing it. We're gonna mix it, blend it with what's coming from America, what's coming from Asia, next level stuff. They just, oh my God, no. She's going to waste our money, right? So that's been the challenge, trying to teach them to appreciate. That's why we had the competitions. So we run these Afrocentric architecture competitions, get designers from around the world to send in their version of modern prototypes of African architecture. And when we take these winning designs around on exhibitions, the audience would always respond with, oh wow, this is so beautiful. Where have architects been hiding this? This is so lovely. So it is possible to present Black culture in the built environment in a beautiful way. Yes, we see it in the nice renderings, but to get them to take the next step, I think they're waiting for us to build and show them. And the good thing is that there are leading architects today who are doing Adesho Kumbi in Nigeria, of course, Francis Kere, Burkina Faso. There are many who are now starting to get clients. And they're showing the audience that, or the clients, or the end users, the buyers, that it is possible for your building, whether it's your house, your office building, your museum, your place of worship, your mall, it is possible for it to be African and beautiful and modern and first world, So that's been the thing, is reprogramming so that they can accept.
I'm curious what Christian would say to that question. What do you do to deal with the tension of designing for that desire that you might not necessarily agree with?
Yeah, great question. There's what I wish I could do. and there are also things that are practical that we are only able to do. The reality is, in any market, there are segments that seem to be constant. There are segments, I believe, that they call early adopters. Then there's a segment of the early majority and the late majority. And there's the fourth segment that they call the laggards. And those are people that will never change their minds regardless of what you do. So our objective is to work with early adopters, because those are the ones that are able to work with you to achieve what Madhuri is describing, like being able to put some trust in you as an architect, to experiment and prove that you can create alternative aesthetics that are inspired by a certain culture, a certain identity or aspect of it that is no less than what's already on the market. But the reality is the early adopters will only trust in that system once it has proven itself to work. And the late adopters will only work with it when it has gone mainstream in the market. And therefore, it's really accessible and available and affordable, according to them. So the thing that I find different in many cases in African countries is that early adopters are not able to afford financially to work with architects to do that. Those are like most young people that are willing to take risks, that have a different understanding of the history of the African continent and everything else, but they don't have access to finances. And you find that people that have access to finances, majority of them are in the late adopters or laggards. Therefore, it's an uphill battle to try to convince these people of financial means to change their minds and ways to invest in this. So to your question, how do we deal with it? I think personally is to convince at least the people that I know in my circles of friends that it's their duty to change that. Because we're struggling with this identity crisis. Someone just gave a very good example where we believe that the maid or the house helper needs to live with you, but they cannot live in the same conditions as you. Like that is a colonial construct that we're implementing in our own cities and living spaces. We don't even know where it comes from because it has never been like that before. So unless there is a generation of people that commits to changing this, like, this question that I ask you, see me like what it is that we are designing for in urban environments in Africa. Well, until we solve that, then we won't be able to understand the type of spaces that we're trying to do. And to do that, we need people that are willing to spend their money and time and resources in creating these alternative spaces and prove that it's possible to do it.
Right.
I love that. I've got a question.
Just a practical question. Of all of the design standards and regulations that you had to comply with, how many of those were from the estate versus some government entity, municipal, local, or federal?
Okay. So it's still on the books in Nigerian planning practice that using earth, is against the law. If you can imagine that a place like Africa, let me say Nigeria, they're trying to change that. There are people who are able to get their building permits to use clay brick or green materials. So that's one thing that has to change. For the estate, the subdivision, they kind of let us be. We tried to give them their facade. Like I said, they didn't mind us doing anything we wanted behind. So the floor plan for their 3-bedroom bungalow, of course, nothing like ours. Ours was very extensive. So for us, we're looking to push policy. Like in Ethiopia, Ethiopia. So we had a lot of design submissions come in from Ethiopia in 2015. I found out the reason why architects and students were sending their designs to us in the competition was because they had a policy that the government was trying to push, that in order for you to get your buildings approved, your building permits, you actually had to show that you were preserving culture, you were specifying green materials. At least this is what obtained in 2015 at that time. So the architects were sending their designs to see if they could pass our test, and they could definitely pass their government's test, right? So policy has to change. We have to encourage this, not just the curriculums in schools changing, but the policymakers. Or in Morocco, where it's the local master builder who's the head supervisor, foreman on site, and trained architects have to report to him, which is why in Morocco you do see modern Moroccan, very beautiful, the right materials, the courtyards, the aesthetics, all that's there because they truly are blending traditional with contemporary. So it's pushing that policy would change. Yeah.
I love that. Thank you for that response. I have a question. Ooh, I'm so sorry. But I'm going to go ahead with my question. And it really does piggyback off this. In our session on housing, we talked about needs, and when you import a solution, you kind of import the needs that come with it. So I'm curious, what imported design aesthetics or practices do you see every day that you really fundamentally disagree with, and why? And we can start with Christian first, and you.
Like what design practices I see imported often that I fundamentally disagree with.
Yes.
Well, the question.
That was the question.
Okay. Oh gosh, where to start from? I mean, in the realm of housing, if we speak specifically for housing, I would say that the standard floor plan for an open floor, 2-bedroom apartments, and open kitchen concept with kitchen islands, it is just not what people use their spaces for in most African cities that I've been to. I don't think that model, though it works with developers' spreadsheets and profit-making structures, it's contradictory to many ways African families that live in urban centers in Africa live. I've never seen it used the way I've seen it used in European or US cities in Africa.
Yeah, those open floor plan kitchens are the worst because making our food is very spicy and it just really gets into the house. So you can't have an open plan kitchen. It's impossible. But they're important in that. I think for me, it's the materials and the style of the architecture. So for Africa, like I said, being colonized, being told that whatever you were doing was primitive and all of that, pulling all that down, then importing cement, importing floor plans, right? Importing architectural philosophies from outside, all of that. And so now we're building, the courtyards are gone. There was a reason why we had courtyards, right? The indoor-outdoor relationship, ventilation and all of that. So the courtyards are gone, and now we're cramped in these houses built out of cement. Now we make our own cement. It's just the worst material. You're just not comfortable. So I think that's it for me. And then now you start trying to struggle, to find a way to keep the house cool. If you cannot afford a generator with diesel because we don't have proper power grids, right? So there's no lights, there's no air conditioning, and you're in this house and you're baking. That imported model is just the worst. So going back to how we used to lay out our spaces, open courtyards, proper ventilation, using the right materials, not cement, that's what gets me.
My last question before I officially finally turn it over to everyone else who has questions is, we see like some of these, I guess, ideas and designs are not working, right? People can see them. If you're in a house that's too hot, nobody has to tell you the house is too hot, it's not working. So I guess from your experience, I don't know how to put this except to say, what then is the hiccup, right? Why will people not change the problem that they're facing today?
So they don't know. So it becomes normal for a mother to bring her baby back from the hospital, you know, after giving birth to the baby's fine, you get home, and then the baby is covered with heat rash for the next 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. The baby is cooking in the, and she's not thinking, I don't know, because maybe they don't know architects, maybe because the architects have not thought through it, so they have not provided her with a home that's cool. So she just thinks it's normal. Yes, the baby will be covered in heat rash for the next 6 weeks. She's not even thinking that it's because of poor architecture, right? So we're not having, there was a time when architecture and construction was part of our culture. All of our cultures in Africa, and probably definitely around the world, right? I know of Africa for sure. Everybody knew in that community the floor plans, the materials, and the construction methods to build in their community. Every man, woman, and child came together to build said house, palace, shrine, market, whatever it was. It was in the culture. So from birth, you knew why you were doing what you were doing. It wasn't that you had to go and call somebody who had a 5-year degree with license to answer, to give you what you could do on your own. So there's no communication between community and design professional, because we've now separated the profession from culture. Then nobody knows. So the woman just manages. People, bathtubs. Why do you have bathtubs? Nobody in Africa fills a tub up, puts the Epsom salt or bubble bath, whatever that is, in there and sits in there and soak. Nobody does that. But every house will have a bathtub, and they will spend money for the bathtub that nobody's going to use. They take showers. So why aren't the homeowners talking to the architects, the developers, that we don't need this? Let's actually reflect our culture, how we actually take baths or how we actually cook. In Hausa land, the people in their parlors, they sit in the living room like this, they put mats and they put their food on the floor and they eat. So why do they have a dining room and dining table? Right? So there are certain features that, okay, but the people are not talking with the professionals. So if that dialogue, if we can bring architecture back into the culture, then I think we'll start solving some problems. The ordinary man and woman will talk to the professionals and will provide something that works. Because they should also be bringing some cultural memory to the table. This is how it used to work. Houses never collapsed in the past. Why? Because in our culture, every year we went out and we replastered the house after the rains. It was clay or mud or whatever you want to call it, earth. That was in our culture, so the houses did not fall. And we all knew the technology behind it. Today, y'all know Nigeria and some other places, every day a mall is collapsing, a house is collapsing. Come on, what's that about? What's the disconnect? Somebody is going to school to train to do something that they don't understand, or they're trying to read in a book. They've never been to America. They don't know how that skyscraper was built. You will now try and build it in an environment from reading in a book. And then because of financial issues, you are cutting back on materials, or you're getting substandard materials, and you build the building and it falls. But in your past, buildings did not collapse. Why? So did we civilize or decivilize ourselves? Right? Or you talk about affordable housing, right? People having to do all manner of terrible things in the name of trying to afford their rent. Terrible things, very immoral things, to get money to pay their rent. Oh, affordable housing, I can't pay my rent. They're calling money, it's so expensive. But in the past, everybody had a house. And they didn't have to do terrible things to have that house because it was in the culture. Like I said, the land is free. How big is Africa? The land is there. The materials are under your feet. The science and the technology from building is there. So everybody built and everybody had a house. And the houses could grow as the families grew. They could come back to earth if the family reduced. So today is when we're acting like we don't have any sense. And people in the past. So those people need to communicate. That information needs to be brought to the table for everyone to share, not just in Africa. Everybody's looking for answers right now. Affordable housing, green living. Millard Fuller did it very well. What did Millard Fuller do? He got people to donate time, material, labor, and we go out and spend 2 weeks building 30 houses for the needy. He got that concept from the Congo, sitting there in 1940, watching some Africans do that. Oh, you can learn from Africans to solve some problems if you want to. It's called community engagement. I don't want to pay a $300,000 or $1 million house mortgage if my friends in this room can help me build my house, and we can all help you build yours and yours and yours. I'm not saying that the people in the profession should not eat. I'm not saying that people in engineering or architecture shouldn't get the design fees. I'm just saying let's work it out where we can really solve problems. Let's really solve the problems that we have.
Any follow-up comments or questions? Plenty. Let's start.
First of all, thanks for the talk. Many things that you shared I resonated with. Like, for example, we used to come together and build houses. It used to be like a rite of passage. When people get married, the whole community comes together to build your house that you move into. So that really hit me. But I have a question about your presentation, about an implementation question. Do you have any information about why the supplier of the bricks couldn't supply as much as you needed? Was it financial? Was it material? It's like compressed earth, right? I don't believe they ran out of earth. So what happened there?
So the skill is not there. Skill's not there. If there's no demand, then no one's learning how to make those bricks. If there's no demand, then why is the manufacturer going to produce them and have them waiting? And no architect is specifying them in his buildings. So it's not in demand. So it has to be in demand. Like I said, so first of all, you have to remove the stigma from green building materials. All right, right now, everybody, even the poor person, I want a cement house. I don't want a mud brick or clay brick or earth brick. I don't want that. So you have to design with it beautifully. You have to train the architects to design with it beautifully, the artisans, the builders to build exactly what that rendering looks like, because you can do a very pretty picture, but to actually execute it in real life is a problem if you don't have anybody who has the expertise. So the first batch he delivered, we were so excited. And then the second and third and the fourth, he just couldn't. He would supply, and as you're picking up the bricks, it's crumbling, right? So, once this is mandated, then people in the engineering and construction schools would spend their time in university perfecting these, making these green materials standardized. Teach them how to make. Of course, train the architects to design with them so that there is actually a demand. So that's what happened. He just could not deliver.
Thanks for your presentation, first of all. I have a question around contextual design. And one of the things you mentioned now in your presentation was the fact that this was within an estate. And so there was already a prototype that was to be, replicated across over the land. I'm curious about your thoughts about how that changes the landscape of what already exists. One of the things you hear a lot in design school, architecture school, is how you need to pay attention to context to design, so that you aren't just putting something in and force-fitting it within the context if it doesn't quite marry what exists. And now, if you look at the design that you were suggesting, it would have been much more ostentatious than what eventually it was, right? Yeah. So I'm just curious around your thoughts about that. And if this was to become more commonplace, what would it do? What would it do to how we see our communities, our neighborhoods begin to look like, and what does that do to just, having some kind of, maybe not repetition in design, but some similarities with what you want to see in a community. If you think about business districts and how they say this area should be, skyscrapers, or these need to be very tall and elegant. There's a look ascribed to a space, right? So just wanted to hear your thoughts around that.
Okay, so for zoning, I'm good with zoning being very determined. This is residential, this is for education, factories, whatever, that's fine. For housing, I think that we're all unique. I think it's like, it's horrible when you go into an estate in Nigeria, to me, and it's like barracks. Every single house is the exact same house. That's not how it is here. There's some individuality. I mean, there are subdivisions here that have a standard plan. Okay, this one has brick facade, but this one is stucco facade. This one is stone facade. They change the colors. Maybe somehow the floor plans are kind of the same, but you're looking at the houses and they're different. So I think that, number one, let architects have jobs. Why should one floor plan be used for all? There are 500 houses, there are 500 architects. Let all of them be able to earn something. So number one, provide jobs. Number two, individuality. I feel like you should be individual. We're not all wearing the same thing. In Nigeria, it's 200 ethnic groups. So why should if there's only one culture deciding the look or the aesthetic of a building, are we all going to enter Yoruba houses? No, I'm Igbo. I want an Igbo-inspired house. So let me be able to showcase my Igbo culture. Let the Hausa person be able to showcase theirs. That's beautiful. It's art. Architecture is art. So I think that we should be expressive. Like I said, CPDI is not only African, it's African diaspora. So what's African-American architecture? I live in Atlanta, so I should be able to go to the south side of town where I live and drive around and know that I'm in a place that is inhabited by African-Americans. The same way I know their music, their food, their collard greens and cornbread. Why can't their architecture reflect their identity as well? Haiti, Jamaica, anywhere. Every culture in the world, like I said, Spain, Poland, everybody has their identity. So I think for that, I think our culture and heritage should be preserved in our architecture. I think that architects should have an opportunity to design. It should be neat, it should be beautiful. I think that's one of the things that Nigeria is worried about, that they allow everyone to do their own design. It will be chaos. But let there be some kind of facility manager who manages, okay, do your design, bring it to the office, let's make sure it's okay, then fine. We will supervise your construction so it's also built well. But let there be opportunity for architects to express themselves. That's what I think. So yes, that estate, so people drive by that house and they always ask, who was the builder? Because they can tell that somebody paid attention to detail, that house stands out. I should have shown pictures. It stands out of all the houses in the neighborhood, as you see what we did. Yeah. He said we have 5 minutes.
Yeah, we do.
Hello, thank you so much for your presentation. My name is Obin, and my question is open-ended. But so I'm curious to know how much external support do you think expanding this sustainable building initiative in Africa, or various regions of Africa, would require, and to what extent would that impact the Afrocentric nature of this initiative? Like, I grew up in Cameroon, and I know for a fact that while certain governments may have resources to expand these initiatives to some extent, they're often mismanaged or embezzled. And so, like, back to your example of the there's an African designer who's trying to replicate this vision of an American building, and not because he hasn't been to America, he ends up not achieving that fully and ends up having flaws and collapsing. What if what about those communities in Africa who don't have maybe the funding or resources available and like enough expertise in like sustainable building, forcing them to like have people from like funding and expertise come from outside, and then potentially having the same situation where the expert from outside who doesn't have a clear vision of African sustainable design is trying to do something that ends up maybe not collapsing, but not really respecting the Afrocentric nature, like even like the bathtub example, for instance.
Can I direct that question to Christian first? Because I think he's going to have something to say about this.
Ask him if he heard.
Oh, Christian, did you hear that?
Yeah, I heard about it, but it's a tough question. To ask what needs to change so that things can go well, it's in my opinion, it's a number of things. I think first one is we need to have established frameworks to create and develop knowledge. A lot of things that Madili was talking about are things that are facts that existed, that people knew how to do it. But what doesn't exist now is a process in which that knowledge is updated, is developed, and is codified into laws and trends makers, so that people can not only desire them, but are required to do them. And there are financial modelings that exist to make them possible for our communities. I like to say this, that in Africa, we are like an iPhone running an Android system on it. It's like the software and the hardware are not compatible. And because of that, there's a lot of inefficiencies and bugs that make things that you describe, like, corruption and siphoning money and not developing things properly the way they're supposed to be developed, because there are no backstops to that system to prevent that happening. There are no checks and balances to make those things be preventable or reversible when they do happen. So one of the things that I think needs to happen is, you guys are like in the US, you got.
While we're waiting for Christian to load, Madili, do you want to take that?
Everything he was saying is on point.
Stanford, you're very brilliant. Like the things we need to figure out how to, namely the financial sector system, and we need to talk to regulators so that that knowledge is actually codified. Like certain things are prohibited from being done because we say they're incompatible with what we're doing, and then other things have to be required because we know it's safe for the environment, it's compatible, and it's actually good for the population. And then we have to make sure that the institutions or people or that I call trend setters are actually abiding by these things. If government agencies are building the way they build, you cannot ask private citizens to do it differently. And to be fair to people, I don't think it's because people don't talk to architects, because people know how to build, especially, the majority of the societies that don't have access to architects. So people consume what market has made available. Oftentimes, these solutions are things that have evolved for millennia, and therefore there is a built-in intuition in how to do them that everybody understands. Madili was giving examples about how people had systems built around how everyone will get a home without having to get a mortgage and everything else. So what has changed is that we have a new system which did not take enough time to develop, understand, adapt, and evolve enough for it now to be mainstream so everybody knows how to do it. We can't expect every single African or every single person living in any given country in Africa to have an access to an architect and speak to them about their own private homes. But you can believe they're going to speak to the person in the neighborhood, in their village, who is the builder. Therefore, the knowledge needs to be imparted to the builders, because the builders are the ones that are going to make these spaces. But if the builders are checking Pinterest to know what they're building for their next customer, we, the professionals, will be fighting an uphill battle that actually can't win. It's not possible. So if you want to reverse the phenomenon you described, my recommendations would be, first, we need to focus on knowledge. The knowledge of what we know that we know works, can work, needs to be studied, it needs to be understood, it needs to be cross-sectorial, and it needs to lead to practical solutions. And number two, most of it needs to be codified into how we build and enforced. And then the third, it needs to be democratized, so that it's not just a few architects and the number of big developers that know how to do that and have put licenses on intellectual property so they can perpetually make money out of it.
Thank you for that answer. Madly, can you wrap us up with your answer?
Okay, so I'll stand on the existing protocol with Christian, because that was a really good answer. They say Africa is the final frontier. Everywhere has been developed except Africa. Africa was developed, then she got underdeveloped, so now she wants to come back up. So 1.2 billion, they say, it's probably more than 1.2 billion people. But that continent has to be rebuilt. The West, Asia, Europe, they are built. Most of the jobs, they say, in the future in architecture and construction will be in Africa. So if we're all going to go and work in Africa, what Africa do we want to build? I think the job is for us to think through. Africa had developed to a point, she was conquered, now she's trying to live under these imposed systems. It doesn't work. So how Africa would have naturally progressed is the question. So what we do at CPDI and what we ask everybody to do, especially on the ground there, is go back and take all the lessons that still have value. What's not relevant, leave it in the past. But what has value from Africa's past, bring that to the table today, and then blend it with what works, sustainable practices that work outside of Africa. Blend those two and see what we can build in Africa. So there's work there. And I invite everyone to join us, to come bring the best, not what has ruined Europe or America, the things that we're all complaining about now, global warming, all those things. Any green ideas that we have that are futuristic, bring those to Africa and let us blend with what is indigenous science and technology in Africa, and blend them and create the continent that we want. And it would influence everybody else too. But we don't want Africa to be another version of America or Europe. The planet can't sustain it. The entire Africa, that means we won't be breathing, right? So that's what I say, is that we collaborate, but that we bring the best.
Thank you for that. Thank you everyone for participating.